I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this morning. This is a special called meeting for September 27th. And we're going to have a presentation by the EDC, Scott Miller and Nick Berry, discussion on the data center project.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council. Pleasure to come before you all this morning to propose the issue regarding a new technology opportunity. And on the drive over here this morning, I was thinking about how many years I've come in front of this council and count for budget requests, and times weren't quite as good as what they are. But thinking through that process, this opportunity brings an opportunity that I think will provide a continued economic opportunity for the town of Maiden. And so with that in mind, I think you've got to think about making sure that the existing industries that are here stay here and have the ability to retain their people. You've got to provide opportunities for new tax-based growth, and certainly that's what this council is all about, which will be able to provide new opportunities, but also to develop new ways in which the council can fund all of that without raising the tax rate. Certainly that's what we're trying to help you do this morning. I'm going to bring up Mr. Berry, who many of you all know as county manager, but who retired recently and joined the Economic Development Corporation. So we're happy to have him at least 20 hours a week. So, Nick.
Hey, Mick. I forgot to announce something. Miss Holly Crafton-Lay asked me to make sure everybody knew that the reason she wasn't here, she was up late last night with her ailing father. She wanted to be here, but unfortunately she was not. So she also asked that we keep her and her family in her thoughts and prayers. So I forgot to do that before we got started, and I apologize. Sorry about that, Mick.
No worries. So this is, and I'm making a couple of comments. First of all, thanks Scott. It's great to be here with you all this morning. I know it's tough to organize everybody's calendar to have a meeting like this, but this is a project that as we go through, we'll talk about and see how intensive it is and how much effort it's taken to get to this point in time, and the time frames of everything that needs to happen in the next several months required us to ask you all to have a special call meeting. So we're grateful for you doing that and taking the time. And part of the presentation I'm going to tailor a little bit to the folks who were here at the planning board meeting, because I don't think we did as good a job as we should have with the engineering folks we've been working with to really show how this property lays out. So, in general terms, you know, why was this property selected by the company to pursue the data center? And it really has to do with the brown and the blue lines on this map. So in Maiden, you all, over the course of really generations, have done a great job of putting water and sewer lines not only in your town, but in proximity to your town. And so it was really the utilities and the access to power and natural gas that made this site originally rise to the top. And in this view, you can see the where the transmission power lines come in there at the top, the aerial view of the property. And so what we have before you all this morning is to consider just under 300 acres to be annexed into the town of Maiden and to be rezoned. It's also unique to find that much acreage that is under control by really just two families. Typically when Scott and I are working projects like this, we're dealing with multiple families and different individuals to try to assemble large enough tracts for projects like this to take place. And the rezoning request is generally from R20 to M1. So let's look at the site layout itself, and we'll spend quite a bit of time diving into this. The proposal is for ultimately 5 buildings constructed on this 300 acres, but that will be a phased development. It'll start off with 1 building, and what they're proposing and what you see on this schematic is many years, and they can't say, we can't say exactly how many years it will take before they completely build out. That will depend on their business model and various plans. For a site this big, it's very, very minimal traffic impact. So we're only talking about 50 jobs as the commitment in the economic development agreement. Likely will be few more than that, but in terms of a site like this, if it were to be a manufacturing or a trucking industry, you know, you would have hundreds and hundreds of trips a day coming out onto Zeb Haynes Road. So it would be a relatively small impact. As you all are well aware, being the host for the Apple data center, these facilities, the companies want them to be extremely secure. They prefer that people really don't know that they're there and that they have no impact on their neighbors. And then get into a little bit more detail on how that's going to look. So it'll be a highly secure facility with fencing, minimal noise. There are generators, but they'll only be used in power outages and for testing. And even the generators, based on the study that's been done, will generate only a small amount of noise. And for the most part, we're going to try to use the existing vegetation that's there. You all have driven the site, see where the site is. It's heavily wooded property. Now some of that obviously will have to come out, but especially around the edges, they will try to keep that, and where they can't, there will be berms and plantings. I want to also say that at this point in the annexation and rezoning, this is a fairly good schematic, but it is not the final design, so there's always the potential for some modifications, and of course that process of the final design goes through extensive federal, state, and town of Maiden reviews to meet all of those requirements. So what I thought we'd do is zoom in a little bit from the bigger picture. This is what we really missed with the planning board, and I apologize. Scott and I debriefed afterwards, and you know that could have been done better to help answer the obvious questions about, okay, well how close are things to the residential area? So I'm starting with kind of what I called in the initial plans and conversations with the company. Okay, well, so we got a couple of pinch points here. And the first one is right here off of Zeb Haynes Road, where the residences come in closer proximity to the facility. So we went ahead and did this to scale. We didn't know the scale, didn't have the scale before, and so this corner down here at the very bottom, and that might be a little hard for you all to see, hopefully you can see in your handout, is 196 feet from the building to the residence. Okay, and then as you go up the line there, we got 240 feet, 264 feet, then 307, 366, 380, 390, 437, 417. And 694 feet. So I just read the distances of all those red lines with the red arrows going up.
You point out the difference in the shading on the graphic. That area caused some concern in planning.
Yeah, and so that shading, so just outside the blue line, which is the property line, it is simply a way to draw your eye to the edge of the line. That is not the footprint, not the property line of the project. It's simply something that they do when they make these maps to make it easier for you to see what is in that little boundary area between the two properties. So that does not signify or mean anything. It's just a grayed out area. Okay. So that's the distances, the closest being 100, sorry, it's even hard for me to read on my screen here, 196 feet from the closest closest home to the corner of the building. So then that begs the question, okay, well, what's gonna sit in that space? So in that 190 feet, and I've just taken the view of 1360 Zeb Haynes Road, so that's the home that is closest to a facility. In that 190 feet, there will be a fence, a retaining wall, even a roadway around the building. So you can kind of see how that lays out. And then if you look at it from the profile view, we've got the home sitting there. You can see how the elevations are going to play out. So in that 190 feet, again, we have a fence, we have existing treescape, existing plantings, as well as some new plantings. You can see there's actually a retaining wall, that small blue line, and the elevation of the building you can see is dropped down where it is just slightly above the elevation of the home there, 10 feet. That's approximately 10 feet below the existing home grade. So with the existing mature trees, with new plantings that'll take place, we feel pretty good about the buffer that will be in that 190 feet there at 1360 Zeb Haynes. And then we did not do a slide for every single residence, but basically you're going to have the exact same scenario between the residences and the facility itself. Then if we move to the top end of Zeb Haynes Road, and take a look at how that's going to lay out. So this purple box is basically a substation type of structure. That is not what the engineer has called it. They've called it a electrical facility. So I can't tell you exactly what would be in that area, but you can see that there will be plantings that will take place, screening that facility from the road, this back entrance road, and maybe I should have clarified this at the beginning, but so this bright green line right here on the lower right hand of the slide is just an outline of Zeb Haynes Road as it makes its turn back toward 321. So the main entrance of the facility, we go back to the main diagram. The main entrance of the facility is here off of Old Maiden Road, which is that little stub out cul-de-sac. So that will be the main entrance to the facility, with parking there, with employee entrance, etc. And as we go to the top of Zeb Haynes Road, that is an emergency entrance. So it will actually be gated. Actually, both entrances will be gated, but that one will be closed, except when we need to call fire, police, something like that to come into the back of the facility. And I would imagine for energy employees to get access to that yard as well. So again, that purple is not a building. It is I'm going to go ahead and call it a substation. In my mind, that's what it is. The electrical facility there. So let's zoom in on that corner. That's kind of our next pinch point. They do have plantings all along through there. Let's kind of take a look at how that lays out. So here we have 285 feet from the existing home to the proposed electrical equipment area. Again, there will be existing vegetation, a fence, a roadway between the property line and the equipment area. And then we can drill in a little bit further and take a look at how that's going to lay out. That 285 feet, so you're talking almost a football field distance. We'll have the existing line of trees and vegetation, then there will be a fence, then there will be a roadway, and then another actual set of trees, so a second stand of trees, and then a second fence. So in that, almost 300 feet, two vegetated buffers as well as fences and an actual roadway where they can access the electrical facility. So just in conclusion, It's a multi-year development, as I mentioned. We'll start with one building. At this point, we do not know which building they will begin with. It'll be developed under all federal, state, and local mandates and other development requirements. There was some conversation about stormwater, given the proximity to the creek there. And the facility will have the appropriately permitted stormwater detention facilities to take care of any runoff. That property does slope, of course, down to the creek, so we don't anticipate any impact on the neighbors in terms of stormwater from the new facility. And as I mentioned, for a industrial park that size, extremely limited traffic to the site as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all may have on the facility and on the proposal.
So the first one, Nick, for me was with regard to the generator testing. Usually that's a weekly event. And the timing of that, even though I think it will be quiet, as we have several folks in town who are doing that already, and you don't really hear those even in our town buildings. But the timing of that test, I think, would be very impactful of whenever they do their weekly tests. That, you know, so there's a local industry that has an air compressor that kicks on. I can set my watch by and I can hear that in the evenings, and it's probably a half a mile away from me. But I would just be interested to try to incorporate that into a time that would not be impactful on any residents or anybody in that vicinity.
Yep, that's a good point, Commissioner. I have not heard of a schedule for that. Have you?
They have talked of it daily, I mean, during the day, being their testing time, and then they have monthly, quarterly, and annual testing of that. So monthly is basically just starting and stopping of that. They have also said that residential facing generators will be inside either an enclosure that limits any output from that, noise output from that. And then there will be, if not a enclosure,
A deflection.
there'll be a sound wall.
Yeah, and most of them have I call it a deflection wall where it bounces off of that. And it is pretty much invasive, but I would just say that the daytime hours would probably be better.
And their standard for any noise coming from a facility that they have shared with us is that at 50 feet, it will not be louder than conversational voices.
That's right.
And then once you get beyond the 50 feet, obviously it goes down from there. So that applies to any type of sound that's coming from the facility, whether it be the generators being tested or any HVAC sounds or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions I can answer at this point? Thank you.
Thank you, Mick.
I can.
Before we start.
Just for the audience, before we start, we're getting ready to go into two public hearings. The first public hearing is just going to be on the issue of annexation, which is whether or not the town brings this property in and basically makes it town property. The second one will be the zoning hearing, which is what use the town is going to allow in that area. So just so you know that those are two separate issues that we're going to be dealing with. So the first hearing is the annexation hearing. That's just whether or not the town is going to annex this property in.
You don't have anything? All right, we're going into public hearing for annexation of Boyd Farms Incorporated and the Cloninger properties.
Good morning, Council. As the ADC mentioned, this property is on Maiden Road and Old Maiden Road. It's roughly 296 acres. I'm just going to briefly go over the location of this property and where our town limits are currently. For the general statutes purpose, this is a contiguous annexation as opposed to a satellite annexation. We have town limits
So Blake basically said in that the staff and clerk have reviewed all the signatures in that, and he also described what utilities that the town has currently with regard to that land. That was the only thing that really, did I miss anything, Blake?
Thanks, David. Question?
If anybody else would like to speak, we just ask you to come up to the podium, give us your name, your address.
Good morning, my name is Mike Susio. I live on 1106 Springdale Drive, which borders this and Zeb Haynes Road. I have several questions, and I ask the first question with the utmost respect to all of you, but does any of this impact any of your residents?
So,
That's a yes or no. It's probably a no, because I'm not getting a lot of questions from the panel here, and it's concerning to not only me, but I think I can speak for several other people that's sitting in your room here. My second question is, he mentioned water runoff.
Mike, before you go to the second one, do you want us to answer the first one?
Well, I didn't get any response, I'm just going by eye contact and body language, and it doesn't look like anybody is impacted. Their residence is impacted from this project.
So my residence is the closest
Okay.
as anyone on here. I don't anticipate that the noise or I don't think that there will be a traffic issue based off of what we heard here today. And I would tell you that our review of this didn't just start today. This is the public hearing piece of that, and we have been engaged in this process prior to this. So we've had lots of questions too. Many of those have already been answered either at the public hearing, the first public hearing with the zoning or planning board or whatever. And then here today, I'm more apt to listen to your concerns and then react to those. But we have been engaged to that.
Fair enough.
And two, sir, I'd like to say I have a furniture manufacturing facility less than 100 yards from my back door. So yes, and it's been there for 40-some years.
Completely. I appreciate that. It's a completely different facility though. The environmental impact of this project, he mentioned water runoff earlier, and he said, you mentioned the grade of the land going into the creek. Are we positive that the water going into this creek is safe? You know, you mentioned that, hold on, you mentioned that,
Can I stop you
No,
for
sir.
just a moment?
So, we're not trying to be rude, but what we,
neither am I, sir.
no, you're gonna get, we have two public hearings. The first one is just for annexation. The second one is rezoning and those type of questions, and they have to stay separate. That's the only thing me and Scott, the attorney, is trying to keep separate.
Okay.
Right.
And that's fair,
That's absolutely fair.
and I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but we're just trying to keep the train going on the same path for each one of them. So a lot of your questions need to be done in the second public hearing. And then, so that, for people that's never been to one of these meetings before, we have the public hearings first, back to back, and then they vote. So don't think we're gonna vote and then listen to another one. We're gonna listen to all your questions, whatever you have, we're here until we get done. But we just need to keep them in the same pod or the same public hearing that they need to be in.
Okay.
All right.
That's fair enough, and I
Yes, sir.
appreciate you. I do. I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
No.
But there is a lot of concerns here. And I'll leave you with this. It also concerns myself as well as other people in here, I'm sure, of the times of your meeting. Most people are at work when you're having these meetings. Therefore, you probably would get bombarded with a lot of legitimate questions. But I appreciate your time, and I would ask you respectfully if you would consider the time of your public meetings to benefit the public. Thank you.
Anyone else? hearing is closed on the annexation. Now we're going,
Is there going to be where will they be parking? People that's going to work at these facilities, where will the parking be?
That would be in the
That's gonna be in
open
the
meeting. If you'll stand right there and let him open up the next one, we'll get to that question.
now we're opening it up for the rezoning and initial zoning of the Boyd Farms and Cluniger properties, ZMA 2-2022.
So for all the questions that y'all have, this is the public hearing for most of them. So your question about parking, ma'am?
Yes.
So, Mick, would you like to answer that?
Yep, if you go back to well, the simple answer is inside the facility, coming in off of, old Maiden Road. There will be a gated entrance and then the parking will be back behind the facility. So there's not gonna be a lot of employees there, so they won't have a lot of parking. Right,
On this
see that
left.
yeah, that bright green area to the left,
Yes.
that's the parking area.
Ma'am, could you please state your name for the record?
Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah, can you go to the, the project overview, as they did state, the applicants for this project was the EDC, formally filed by the property owners of Boyd Farms and Cloninger, the Cloninger family. They are the owners of the property. Most of this property is in the town's, what's known as the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means this is not inside the town limits, but we do exercise zoning authority on, many of these parcels. There is one parcel that is inside of Catawba County's zoning jurisdiction on the north. All of these properties are zoned R20. The request is for the annexation, rezoning, and initial zoning from R20 to M1. It's roughly our low density, the county's roughly low and medium density, to M1, which is our industrial manufacturing. That's
Blake, if this council takes no action and this property was sold, roughly how many homes could they put on with no regard to any public body?
Shooting from the hip, we're saying probably north of 400.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The size of the property, as already discussed, it's 5 lots totaling roughly 296 acres. Location on Zeb Haynes Road and on Maiden Road. Just going over the adjacent zoning, to the north, we have the Catawba County R20, which is that orange color that you'll see there. To the west is also Catawba County's R20. To the south is M1 and C2. As I mentioned, M1's our industrial and manufacturing. C2 is our general commercial. The purple on the bottom of the screen is that M1. It's roughly 300 acres of a similarly zoned property, which is that rock quarry and the adjacent property to the rock quarry. And then to the east of this is the town of Maiden's R20 and R15 properties. That's in the light tan color and the green. Current uses on this property are open land and timber. They clear cut for timber that northeast portion of this property. The surrounding uses are a mixture of vacant, agricultural, residential, and the rock quarry, as I mentioned, to the south of this property. And it is located in our ETJ and in the county's zoning. The information that the board is required to consider from the UDO is whether or not this is consistent with the long-range plan, and whether or not it meets the requirements and intent of the Maiden Unified Development Ordinance. It is not consistent with the Maiden Comprehensive Plan. The Maiden Comprehensive Plan map shows this area as remaining residential. Proposed, and the next is whether or not it's next is whether or not we can supply the development, as a result of this rezoning. We do have utility capacities, available in this area, as we discussed in the last public hearing, and we are familiar with, the needs of data centers, from the Apple, data center that we have on Startail Road. The next is whether or not the amendment is in the benefit of the public health, safety, and welfare, and in the public interest. The proposed amendment would allow for use that is compatible with the character of land location. This area has the appropriate utility availability and is near Highway 321, located across West Maiden Road from a zoning district of a similar size. And these properties would further contribute to the investment and overall tax base in Maiden. The Maiden Zoning Board of Adjustment did unanimously recommend approval of this project. I'll take any questions.
Blake, when was the zoning board of adjustments meeting?
It was on the second Monday of this month.
What time was it?
It was at 5:30 p.m.
Were there people in attendance there with concerns?
And really quickly, I'd like to touch on the runoff. On this property, we are a phase 2 stormwater community, which means that the development on this site would need to have the SCMs, which are the stormwater control measures. Typically, whenever you have development of this size, the runoff and stormwater will go into the stormwater control measures, which are usually either wet ponds or sand filters that allow that water to sit, usually for about a 24 to 48 hour time frame, allows that water to drain down so that it is not directly running into the stream and causing stream bank erosion. Just wanted to clarify that.
And Blake, historically on properties like this, once we implemented the phase 2 stormwater, the result of the runoff was actually better after the project than before, correct?
Yeah, in a sense.
Thank you.
Blake, I got one more. So I mean, the owners can develop that property, whether we annex or whether we zone it or not. Either way, they have some options there. What benefit does it bring us, the town and our community, if we are to annex and zone it? What, does it give us more control or more overwatch or more regulation? What's the benefit?
Yeah, in this case, there would be typically a little bit more regulation than what the county would have on this type of property, and the use in this indication would be a lot less of a traffic impact than a larger neighborhood, or in the case of the manufacturing, like a trucking terminal or something along those lines.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody like to speak on this particular subject?
And this is the time, if you have direct questions about the use and the zoning, this would be the one you need to ask them about.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name's Bill Castell. Our family owns 10 residential apartment units on Maiden Road, as well as some acreage. What I'd like to ask the council, because I think it was mentioned earlier, what concerns do you all have as you all have been studying this project? And how did you resolve your concerns?
So I'll go first. My concerns were kind of where I just alluded to a while ago. The property owners have a lot of options on what they can or would not put there. And with regard to recent decisions that we've made within our community, I know that the general public, in my opinion, would much prefer an industry or something of this nature as opposed to a housing development. And a housing development to the numbers at which Blake described, 400 houses, just an estimate, would have a much huger impact on several different things. It would still provide tax base for the county or for the town as well. So for me, it was which one of these would be a better fit for our community. And in addition to that, it was also the ability to, earlier a question was asked, would this impact anybody that lives here? I said I live the closest, but we all live in the community and in the town. And the impact of this tax base would continue to let us be in a position where we potentially would not have to raise taxes for our citizens. We have a population of citizens that a lot of those folks are senior adults, so we try to look at that to ensure that we're not doing things that are going to cause tax increases. I'm very proud to say that as a town, we've been able to not have a tax increase, and I think it's 16 years. As a matter of fact, the last action we took, we reduced taxes. So for me, those were my primary concerns.
I would agree with Danny on everything he said, and I looked at the traffic impact. I looked at the number of employees that would be going in and out there. I know from experience, for what we have with Apple, how well they, I don't want to use the word they do secure, but they're able to somewhat camouflage their properties through berms and foliage and different things, and it is very aesthetically pleasing when you look at it. So I feel that this company is going to do a good job with that. And honestly, you know, the question was asked, I don't own property right there in that vicinity. But for me, if I did, this would be the best option, because obviously these folks are ready to sell this property, and if this doesn't happen, something else will, which will probably be housing. And in looking at that, in my mind, this would be the best use for that property. And I've looked at all different angles of it.
Well, as I look at like the Apple project, that does not impact any residential areas at all. In fact, I drove up there last night to see what the whole impression of that development is. And there's a lot of light pollution. It's pretty ominous structures in there as you drive by. Some of them are 2-3 stories high. The lights are pretty extensive. The gating, you know, you got flashing red lights, and so as you try to envision a project like that here, I didn't see any berms on this project at all. At least up at Apple, like you indicated. Some of the berms are 20 feet high. And then on top of the berms, you've got vegetation that goes up another 20, 30 feet. So you can't, at certain places, you can't see anything. It looks like that isn't the case here. Some of the elevations that you had there, just had some trees. That's the plot.
So there will be berms, but they are not to the point of fully designing this, and we did not want to come to you all and to the town council and say, yep, there's gonna be a berm this high here and a berm there high, that high there, because they're just not there in the design yet. But the commitment will be that where the natural vegetative buffer is not significant enough, that there will be a berm with vegetation on the top of it.
And Mr. Bill, before the project moves forward, they will have to go through a design process with our planning and zoning department that addresses berms and stuff of that nature.
So I would also comment to your statements with regard to Apple, there wasn't any residential impact. I would tell you in our public meetings, that was not the case. There were and there has been, and with each one of those cases, Apple worked directly with the town and the homeowners to find an amicable agreement.
Yeah, they bought the property.
No, not all of them. I can assure you that there's plenty of residents that have been here to have discussions. And what I would say to this is, in addition to your concerns, which are very valid, especially the lighting pollution, shame on me, but I'll be honest with you, that I've seen it just as many times as you have, but I really didn't factor that in or think about that. So I appreciate you bringing that to the table. The second piece of this, with regard to the company who would be interested in doing this project, if you look up the history and the other sites that they have been to or done, then I think that they've demonstrated that they will try to do those berms or other things that are used as a buffer between those buildings there and the residential sections.
Well, you know, the other concern I think we have is the impact on the values of our properties. I would think if residential project land was land, it wouldn't have nearly the impact from a value standpoint.
So you think your value's going up or down?
I think it's going down.
It'll be the first property in Maiden in a long time that the values went down. I would tell you that, because currently the value of property in Maiden is as high as anywhere in the county per ratio.
Well, that might be. However, at the top of that chart, that triangle piece,
Yes, sir.
that's about 25 acres that we own. I think we'd have a hard time selling that property.
I don't think you would.
I
but-
respectfully disagree with you, Mr.
Well,
Hood.
who would go in there, knowing it's surrounded by a data center?
Well, historically, we have found that land around our current data center as either rose at the same ratio as every other piece of property in town or rose significantly higher. It did not decrease. And that's the only thing I can go off of is what's actually in town already.
Well, maybe we ought to look at it instead of what impact it has on the value. What impact does it have on our ability to sell it if we wanted to?
I don't think you're gonna have any trouble, in my personal opinion, if that's what you choose to do. Is your 25 acres in the city limits, town limits?
No.
Understand, thank you.
Now, where all those arrows are, up there showing the distances, that's where our 10 apartment units are. And the terrain there, I don't think it drops off there. So those structures are gonna be right up level to our apartments. And getting back to my question about the berms, if they're not significant, there is gonna be a lot of light pollution. And if you go up to the Apple place at night and look at it, it's almost scary. I mean, it almost looks like trucking terminals and, which is not what I want in my backyard. Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple more questions, if it's okay.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mike, before you start, did Mick answer your environmental, or did we answer your environmental concern with Blake?
That's kind of what my next question is
Okay, I apologize.
about. First things first, though, these maps you're showing us, you're mentioning, you're saying things like northeast, northwest, corner. I doubt seriously if anybody in this room is map makers or draftsmen or some trade of that nature. There's no laser pointers. There's nothing to specifically point out an area that you're talking about. So when this gentleman says in the northeast corner, which is the northeast corner, I'm sure Once again, I'm sure I can speak for everybody sitting here. A little more detail would be appreciated as far as information. Second of all, on the environmental aspect of this thing, are you going to provide data to the public on these storm runoff systems that you mentioned? Will there be public data and proof that these are effective and will not impact our sewage systems or water lines or et
Yeah,
cetera,
I
et
mean,
cetera?
they definitely would not impact the water or sewer lines. They have to submit, their stormwater control measure data, so yeah, that would be.
It will be provided publicly.
It would be public information.
Hey, Mike, back to your original statement, and I would agree with you 100%. But just for the general public that's looking at these pictures, on 99% of all drawings that you'll ever see, the top of the page is due north. Bottom of the page is always due south. To the right would be east, and to the left would be west. So if he says to the northeast corner, if you see that point up there in the top right, that would be the northeast corner. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Well, that's okay, but most informational maps and drafts
Have a
what they
compass.
call a compass.
That's right.
This is very vague, okay? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think it was a good,
It's very, very vague.
I think it was a good point.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, good morning.
My name is John Kula. I live at 2318 South US 321 Highway, right up the road here. I live with Miss Robinson. She bought the property that.
You said John, I'm sorry.
John, JOHN, MCCOULIFF. And Miss Robinson bought the property that we're on in 2006. We've resided there since 2010, so we've been there for 12 years. If whoever is in charge of this map, if you could go back to one of the broader perspectives, the larger, there's a different one that is gonna illustrate my point. Yes, if you don't mind, if I come over here and step away from the microphone. This is, excuse me, this area right here, see, it's like a little chunk out of this, looks kind of like a state, I can't say which one it is, but see this little, it's literally an island inside that parcel right there. I believe this, are you the McCaslin family?
Yes.
That house was built that we live on, it's 1.88 acres, and it was built by a man named Lewis McCaslin, correct me if I'm wrong. Lewis, the story I've tried to figure out forever, because a lot of that land was owned by the McCaslins. On Zeb Haynes Road, there's a graveyard with McCaslin graves there. It's kind of ironic that I'm a Mick too, and I've ended up there. But I've always puzzled how he built his house, how he got that sweetheart deal. He's not inside Maiden. We don't live in Maiden. Okay, we're outside the town limits. We don't pay Maiden taxes. We literally live, or did, until 2 years ago, we lived in a clearing in the forest. We moved here from Manhattan, New York City, the Upper East Side. We just wanted to get out of the city, and we're on a little gravel dirt road. People that have grown up in Maiden don't even know the house is there. A lot of people come visit and they say, we didn't even know there was a house here. That house was built in 1952. Richmond, what is the road behind it, directly behind it? It's called,
Sam Haynes,
no, not Zeb Haynes, the other residential road there.
Springdale.
No, it's that new one where.
Yeah, Springdale, yeah. Springdale, I don't think, because I've looked at the dates of the houses that were built, I don't think Springdale was built until the 60s. So at the time that house was built in 52, he was literally back in an island in someone else's property. And Susie talked to someone in the McCaslin family that was at the last meeting here, and apparently they McCaslin sold the land, and he kept that little bit for himself. He kept an island for himself inside an existing property. So what I'm saying, I guess, is that Susie is 75 years old. She moved here to retire. We don't have the means to leave. And we are in an island inside something that's rezoned, that we don't even live in the town of Maiden. And I have to be very careful what I say next. On the map, it doesn't show this here because that's an older map, but directly to the north of us, I really am in fear of even saying this. there was a structure, not a structure, there was something built 2 years ago. Okay, and I gotta imagine it was built intentionally, knowing that there was gonna be significant power increase
The
needs.
giant substation.
I can't say that, because we are seriously afraid of being annihilated by talking about this. If anyone wants to look it up, like I said, my name is John McCullough. Look up Fox 46 News, look up Matt Grant, investigative reporter, and there's something that happened that involved the United States Congressman and the Department of Justice and the Utilities Commission, and our silence has been bought. That thing that was put up by us, it's not even a building, but it involved leveling the land, and it went on for about a year, and I had a nervous breakdown, and I'm afraid of being annihilated by talking about it. I might have said too much already, but we are in terror, because we're surrounded on 3 sides, and God knows what's gonna be behind us. Just leveling that land behind us, we're afraid of any construction. A year ago, the McCaslins had some people come and clear the lumber behind us, and I appealed to his, to the ethics of this fellow that was running this lumbering company. Please don't bring these machines near our house. Like, I've given you enough information if you want to follow the breadcrumbs. Okay, that's all. I understand this is it's totally anecdotal. We're just 2 people. And like I said, when this other project went on to the north of us, I said, it's like if you're in the prairie living in a sod house and the Transcontinental Railroad's coming through. You know, what are you gonna do? You know, I'm a bit of a nerd, like in Star Trek. I think it was Spock that said the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. You know, that type of deal if you want to philosophize it. But we're 2 human beings and we live there, okay? So all this stuff about property, that's all valid too. I honestly don't think it's gonna improve our property value living with a substation on one side and, I don't know, a parking lot and those data centers. There's one in Granite Falls that someone told me that knows, they said it's like several stories underground, so who knows what type of, I mean, I know there was blasting going on in the ground when they did this other thing next to us, and our house can't stand that. Our house will fall if there's any significant construction that goes on. I can't say anything more about it, but thank you for your time. I just wanted that on the record, okay?
Yeah. Mick, Blake, have you heard of any construction concerns with regard to blasting or anything for this property? I'm not aware of any currently, with regard to the construction of on this property.
Oh, you mean the property that was to the north?
I mean, the property in the red boundaries right here. I don't have a clue what you're talking about on the thing, but you have piqued my interest, and I will definitely look at that, and I might even drive down your dirt road to see you.
Yeah, please come to our
do
door.
that. But I'll be honest with you, I never even heard of that, so I'll definitely check on that.
Well, it was hushed up.
Understand.
And when I say we're down there by ourselves, we were suffering our own private hell and no one knew about it. And we reached out to Matt Grant. And frankly, our congressmen, senators, utilities commission, Department of Justice, North Carolina, they didn't give a damn what was happening to us. I told them I'm, standing up for a senior lady who's having a nervous breakdown. They didn't care. So I've lived through this before, recently. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Kirkland, 1360 Evans Road. My first question, I think, would probably be the EDC gentleman. Would the lighting be similar to what you see at the Apple facility? Is that kind of, I mean, you may not know that, but I would assume that's what we would experience with those buildings, is that it would be fully lit 24 hours a day, or at least at night.
I don't know the specifics of Apple, but the materials that I've seen specific to this indicates that there would be 0-foot candles at the property boundary. That's their commitment. So, and they would use down sloping lighting in an effort to keep that light that might have been talked about. I'm sure you've
There's down lighting on
I
those buildings.
said
So-
I'm not exactly sure what that
It's
requirements
pretty
are
intense.
at.
So it's also important to know that, and we can relate to Apple a lot, but this is a different project. It's also important to know, depending on where you're at on Apple's property, is the different type of lighting. If you're up near Startown Road where, you know, a lot of traffic comes through, that's a major highway, the lighting there is much different than if you're off of the backside where the residentials are. I mean, it's different. It's not the same.
My second question is, and this I just don't know the answer to it, maybe you guys don't either, but when the other development from Apple went in, after it was completed, then, and how many residential homes were affected to the point where they were dealt with by Apple? I mean, how many properties are there? Does that make sense? Does my question
So
make
when,
sense?
so define dealt with, cause that.
So let's say that it
that's
was such a nuisance to a property owner that Apple either went back and did wood burning or bought the property to remedy the situation. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
so-
the best plans of mice and men, you still end up with.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer, and maybe Todd or Blake does, but I can tell you with regard, I think I've been on council longer than most here currently, but I can tell you the people who have came to us with concerns were probably, I could probably count them on one hand. And it was, some of those were mitigated with berms, with trees, with some other things. And then, just to be quite frank, there were some people who elected to sell their property. And I think they were paid a more than fair price, but I think that was their choice rather than deal with that or be that close to Mr. Bill's comments. They sold their property and went elsewhere.
And Kurt, I can answer this. I think they're in the process of building their 7th or 8th building, Blake. Currently, I don't know of any issues with residents in the area.
Is that generally populated in the same fashion that the Zeb Haynes site is with residential?
It's pretty sparse, and there's a lot, to Todd's comments just a few moments ago, the folks on the backside of that have, in my opinion, a lot lesser lighting pollution as
That's
he
Elbow
said.
Road, folks. Is that-
Elbow, and then, if you go down the other side, on Flying Bee Farm Road, that property to the right of there as well. So, you know, I'm not saying that there's nobody that doesn't have any concerns, because I'm sure that they do, but, so far, it continues to show that they've been pretty good neighbors and try to listen to folks around them. But again, this is not Apple, and that this is, that's probably the closest reference that we got to
Yeah,
it.
that's the.
Yeah, that's right.
Devil we know, right?
And I would just tell you that, for those people that are not aware, I'm not saying it's a concern for me, but I can assure you that the public's opinions or anything that would have an impact upon Apple or this company or any company that would be bad public relations would affect them. And so it is in their best interest to work with the people around them. I mean,
I would expect that.
that's a business decision on their part.
Yeah, typically data centers want to come in and get built and nobody knows they're there. And that's ultimately their goal. I think that's one of the reasons you see the 10-foot decrease in land to get them as low as possible so you can't see them.
Thank you.
As those buildings are located, I assume there's lighting on both sides of those buildings. The only place there wouldn't be lighting is on the very ends, I would assume. So you're gonna have alleys of light that if there's any visual ability looking down in there, I mean, it's gonna be, at least up there at Apple, and I know everybody hates to compare it to Apple, but it's the only point of reference I've got. You go up there, and I'm sure some of those buildings are with the backs facing other properties, man. And so so there isn't the extreme amount of light pollution. But if you can just envision downlights on both sides of those buildings, that's a lot of lighting. And the poor people down here, the Gibsons, you know, I mean, they're just, it was like 150 feet, you said, there wasn't much distance there. And I didn't see any berms. All I saw was some existing trees.
So,
It's gonna be pretty horrendous, I think. But,
I got one more quick one.
Could
You
you,
referenced these
could you-
gentlemen on the 4 facilities.
could you come up, we were recording it, and it makes it easier for her to do the minutes.
You referenced these gentlemen on the 4 facilities, and you said that there was no impact on residential areas. On these, was referring to this gentleman's question.
Currently, I do not know of any outstanding issues.
And
is
where
what-
do you get your information?
Most of the time, they call me because I'm the town manager, and
On these 4 facilities?
the neighbors around there know me very well, and they have my card, and they call me or Blake if they have any issues. In fact, one of the neighbors actually works for me.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
yeah, and let's just be transparent on this, Mike. I think that you got a good point. I don't think that Todd, anyone from the county, I don't think that we're gonna imply that there will be no impact. I am certainly not saying that. What we're saying is that this company and the folks who do these kind of developments, it is to a tremendous advantage for them to be as least impactful as possible to those around it.
well, one of the questions I raised at the first meeting that was held, was regarding is there no other place to locate a facility like this?
So,
At least when Apple went up there,
so my challenge to you would be that I don't know if there is or not. They chose to buy this one. However, would it change the scenario? The only thing that would change would be a different set of neighbors that would be in here asking the same questions that
probably
you
a
are.
lot less, just like you just mentioned up there at Apple. How many houses did it affect? Here you got 3, 4, 14, 15, you got about 16 to 20 houses.
I would say Apple had that many, if not more, because going down Startown Road, on both sides of Startown Road, we had folks coming from that side, and then going down the back side, and also Elbow Road, we had that many folks who had concerns.
But didn't Apple buy most of those houses in Startown Road?
So they bought the ones immediately in front of them. I think they bought 3. I'm not sure about that. Maybe 2. I don't know. But on past that second gate, they didn't buy those. They didn't buy the ones across the street necessarily, the church property and that other property. They did buy some. So I'm not going to deny that piece of it. But yeah, I will tell you, there was that many homes impacted whenever they made that decision.
And another question I would ask you to ask yourself is, this land is gonna be sold. What is your best choice for your next neighbor? It's not gonna be woods forever. So is it gonna be a data center who's gonna try to camouflage themselves and be as neighborly as possible and try to work with the neighbors? Or a developer that's gonna come in and build homes and then leave? And I think that's the question this board has been tugging with for the last, 3 or 4 weeks.
I'd rather have a subdivision person.
Yeah, I would say that you're in the minority, and I don't think that you're wrong, but I will just use this example for you. You said you own 10 apartments there. When we have rezoning or whatever with regard to apartments, folks have concerns about that as well. And in the end, the answer to it, whether it goes good or bad, is how the owner of those apartments maintain their property and those relationships. And I think it will be the same for this. If this company does what they said they're gonna do, and that we govern and make sure that we hold them accountable for that to the standards in which are set, I think that that's a different story than someone coming in and doing this. So I think that whatever goes there, if it was a housing development, I promise you this room would be more full today than it was this morning or at the previous meeting in the afternoon. So I don't think that anyone, if you're used to having that vacant land where you can look out your back porch and see nothing but woods and trees and a stream or whatever, nobody's ever gonna say, man, I hope that changes and they move somebody in here and build this or that. I don't think anybody's ever gonna say that. And the only way really to prevent that is if you have the means or the ability to buy that project yourself and isolate it and never do anything with it. I don't have that ability, and not many people probably do. That property is for sale, it has been sold, and they are gonna do something with it. And in our opinion, currently, this was a good fit.
Well, in response, our houses are at the end of McCaskill's place.
Right.
And we have about 30 acres above our house going up to Zeb Haynes Road. I would sell that land to developers before I'd sell it to an Apple facility and have Apple right in my backyard. I'd rather have some neighbors in my backyard.
I don't disagree with you.
And I think you probably do the same thing.
I do not disagree with you one bit. I would just reiterate what my point was. You and I might be in the minority with that thought, and I would 100% agree with you.
Hello, my name is Michelle DeSucio. I just had a couple questions about the back entrance, because that's what's going to affect us. Where you said it was gonna be a gate that we probably wouldn't know unless they were running fire trucks, ambulance. Could you put that back up? Do you know, is it gonna be where they clear cut all those trees? Is that where it'll go in the curve right there, or right
Yes.
above the curve?
Yes.
Or just south, or just east of.
Yeah, advance the.
Couple more.
It's right in that curve.
Right there.
Yeah. Right in the curve, Michelle.
Can I walk a little closer?
Yes, I'm right there with you,
So once
yes.
again, you can't tell much sitting over there to see what's going on here. Okay,
It's like a roundabout kind of.
yeah. Now, I have one other question. You're saying that it's gonna be scheduled, they're not gonna do all the buildings at one time, but they probably will do all of the fencing, berms, and do all the outside,
Typically.
and then they'll start putting the buildings. Okay, I was just kinda curious how,
How it all rolled out.
And Michelle, what we've been informed, they're gonna leave as much mature growth as possible so that it's not like they're gonna clear cut it and then plant 6-foot trees
well,
back.
behind
So,
our house has already been clear cut.
yes, so,
It's-
yeah,
So now we're wondering, okay, what are they sticking there?
yeah.
Well,
You
you
know?
just see this green area as new plantings that would be placed in that area, so.
Right, our house is, you can't see it, it's gonna be where the point of that comes off to the right of the curve. If that boundary's not showing. We are right there on Zeb Haynes and Springdale corner. And all that's already been clear cut right behind us. We didn't even know this was going on till, 3 guys were walking across our backyard and we were informed that they were, what's it called, surveying the land for the owner.
I'll be honest with you, Michelle, you probably knew before we did.
I doubt that seriously.
Then
Really?
you can doubt it if you want to. I can tell you the timeline of it, and
Okay.
We'll
See,
compare
I was
notes.
kind of wondering, because all that work went into the substation, I think where these gentlemen were talking about, and I thought, isn't that interesting? And then all
So-
of a sudden, they're gonna move that.
So I can speak to the substation. GKN was having power flickers. And that substation had been planned, me and Scott worked with GKN and utility commissions. The town of Maiden actually backfed Duke Power for 3 years, because GKN couldn't get enough power. And so they built the substation. Now, did building that substation make this property more attractive? Maybe. But I don't wanna, the substation was not built for this property. The substation was built for
So you can see
GKN.
as a neighbor,
Yes.
how it looks.
Yeah.
But-
looks like they've
but
been
I would-
planning this for a
but I would
couple
ask
years, is
this-
how it looks.
Yeah, I would ask
We were
this,
trying to save 1,700 jobs.
I would ask this question on record. Todd, when we built the substation, did we have any inclination, idea, or thought about this property being sold or developed?
At that time, the property was not for sale. and I don't think the families was interested in selling.
Scott Millar from the county, any idea on that?
None whatsoever.
Yeah, so it was totally unrelated.
Okay, but you can see from our.
100%, 100%.
Now,
A year and a half ago, I had,
They built the substation, they clear cut the land, and then we see.
I can't wait to tell you when I figure this out or knew something about it, Mike.
Okay, but you can see as a neighbor's point of view.
100%.
Substation, clear cut, and then all of a sudden there's a little sign in the curb, and you're like, what the heck is going on? But you can see from our point of view.
yeah, but now, building that substation might make this property more attractive, but it
Well,
was,
you
it
see
was
where
not
they're putting their
connected.
generators and their
Yep.
power is right there connected. to
As
it.
they
So-
should.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, so I can, that's also why it kind of looked that way. Okay. Thank y'all.
Good
Yes,
questions.
Thank you.
Bill's getting his money's worth.
You know, I would hope that the agencies that, whatever's involved, that looks after the best interest of the property owners could put restrictions in or requirements in, just like it was just discussed, that prior to all these buildings being built, the perimeter would be established, and it not be required that this developer, this project, puts the berms in first and ensures the public that they're gonna put berms in just like to protect this lady's property, so that you're not sitting there looking at an eyesore.
So Bill, yeah, so to me, that was my original comment with regard to the annexation. Without us annexing, we have no power, no voice, no anything to have that. With the annexation and then all the zoning stuff that Blake has presented, we have the ability to work with the county, with the manufacturer or the industry, to try to meet those things and try to find compatible agreements during that process. And I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not gonna pretend that I do. All I will tell you is, with the only example that we have, those berms went in first and some other things. So I don't know that that's how it will go down. But I will say, by taking the actions that we're taking, we will have a seat at the table at a minimum.
Well, of course, based upon the charts that were presented, it didn't show any berms. And, you know, it's hard to put requirements in after the property's sold and the zoning's approved and annexation's approved. You got no control.
Actually, that's when we do have control. Before it's in the town, before it's in our zoning, we have no control. Once it's in our town and in our zoning, they have to apply to our building and requirements that Blake and our planning board and the town council has approved. So right now, we have no control over this
Okay,
property.
but once it's annexed with the control, can you put requirements in?
That's in our current code, yes.
If it's in our current code, and again, I'm gonna be as transparent as I can tell you, I don't know that we have the ability to tell someone you have to put a berm in there. And I'm not gonna commit to that, not knowing that. But I will tell you that we have been very successful working with a couple different folks on projects very similar to this.
A lot of times, we sit down and negotiate and tell them this is what we would like for you to do.
And the public.
And the public would like for you to do. And historically, not just on data centers, on other businesses, all of them have been very acceptable to those ideals, because at the end of the day, they want to be a good neighbor. I don't know of one business we have in town that doesn't want to be a good neighbor, because at the end of the day, they don't want to have to deal with neighbors complaining about them every single day and dealing with us as well.
Has the sale of this property been consummated? Well, it would look like it wouldn't be that difficult.
And Scott can talk to this. I don't know if we have the legal authority to do it either. We have to follow general statutes and general laws. And I'm no lawyer, but I did go to grad school, and I don't think we have even if we wanted to, I don't think we have the legal authority to do that.
Wouldn't you have the legal authority to indicate we're not gonna annex or approve the
So,
zoning?
sir, just like you
Zone
wanted,
three?
so if you wanted to develop that 23 acres, there's only so much that we can require you to do in North Carolina. Now, I think we've been very successful with working with people who do develop property. And I think we've done a really good job between me, the planning board, the council, and our planner. But at the end of the day, there's only so much we can require. And I don't know, and Blake might be able to talk to it exactly, but we can only do what the general statute in the state of North Carolina allows us to do. And what you're asking, I think, is illegal.
Well, depending upon how you approached it, but if it was, if you'll agree to this zoning change, if you'll agree to this.
I don't think you can do a quick pro. That will end somebody up in jail by trying to do stuff like that.
I just got one last question. So we're not gonna find out who this is until y'all annex and change all the statutes and do all that? That's when, and the property sales, that's when we'll finally find out who our neighbor's gonna be?
Correct.
We don't know who your neighbor's gonna be.
I hope that folks know also, and Mike's gonna say he don't believe this either. I'm okay with that, but believe it or not, I don't know either.
Well, I've already heard who it is.
Well,
We
you,
have a general idea.
Yeah, so,
But that's just gossip, you know.
and that's not out of the
I
ordinary.
can't believe anybody made
Scott,
this
how many
gossip.
projects do you go through in a given year that the name of the company, because at the end of the day, this company X could come here and do all this, they still have the same requirements as company Y, Z, whatever.
Whoever
So
does
at the
it.
end of the day, it's not about the company name, it's about the product that they're gonna put in.
Well, but it's about, it's
Yeah.
about what they're putting in.
I mean,
So you're saying, so am I understanding, it should be just like Apple, if it's a data center, it's just gonna be buildings?
Yeah. Yeah.
And only 50 employees?
at this time, yes.
That's what Apple started out with, was 50. Now they what?
It's pretty standard, is what we're seeing across the board.
Last question. Has anybody researched the history of this company that's coming to see how their projects have been, assuming they've had others in other parts of the country?
Scott, right behind you. Right behind you.
We don't know.
Well,
I'll address that in that, yes, we have. I'll also confirm that they don't know who the client is, but, we feel like the company has sufficient, wherewithal and standing to do the project as presented.
in your initial presentations back a couple of weeks back, weren't there more discussions about berms and that I don't see here today?
No, I mean, actually, we just refined this to give you the distances, but that's the same schematic. And I would love Bill to be able to tell you, yep, here's exactly where the berm will be, and here's what, your rental property will see and not see, but it would be disingenuous. Because that until they get to the point of the hard engineering, they're gonna screen it to the very best of their ability. Mr. Herman said they really don't want anybody to even know they exist back there. But we can't sit here in good conscience and tell you, there's gonna be a berm here that's gonna be this high with this
That's
plan
right.
on it. I don't wanna do that to mislead anybody. That's the best we can give you at this point in time. But going forward, through the town, through us, through the county, knowing the client, there's gonna be a high standard and a high desire to be the best neighbors we can be, that they can be. And this is just really the beginning of the conversations as it goes forward with you guys as adjacent property owners.
Just a lot of unknowns.
Not as many unknowns as we had 6-8 months ago, where you keep getting it down tighter and tighter. But they have to, know that they can do their project before they're going to go forward in their next steps as well.
It just doesn't look that complicated to figure out where a berm should go. I mean, I bet you for to try to do something. You know, you could build a house, think of all the requirements that are put on, or put in a swimming pool, all the things you've gotta do before you can get approval to even do it. So it looks like that same thing would apply here, but maybe not.
I believe it would apply, but
And you ask if anybody had researched the company. Of course, you know, we've said we don't know who it is. I have my own speculations down to 2 companies, and I have researched both of those significantly throughout the last, you know, several weeks, couple months. And I don't know. I just based on information trying to put pieces together. But I did a lot of research on those 2, and it may not even be either one of those. I have no idea.
Anyone else? If not, we're gonna close the public hearing. You have before you Ordinance 6, 2023, an ordinance to extend the corporate limits of the town of Maiden, North Carolina for the Boyd Farms and Cloninger properties.
this ordinance is for the annexation into the town only.
Make a motion on ordinance number 6, that ordinance to extend the corporate limits of the town of Maiden for Boyd Farms Incorporated and Cloninger properties.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion's carried unanimous. Ordinance 7 2023, ordinance to amend the town of Maiden zoning maps for Boyd Farms and Cloninger properties.
This would take it from residential to M1.
I make a motion, ordinance number 7, 2023, ordinance to amend the town of Maiden zoning maps for Boyd Farms Incorporated and Cloninger properties.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion's carried unanimous.
And I don't know, this is no motion, and this is not included in the agenda, and it's really off topic, but we do have a fall festival planned for Saturday. We do have a hurricane coming in. So, me and, Keaton is going to play, meteorologist either Thursday afternoon or Friday morning and make a decision. The last time we tried to move it indoors was a disaster. And so it's probably gonna be either we're gonna try to do it or we're just gonna cancel it. But we would let council and the public know Thursday afternoon, Friday morning.
I'd like to make a comment too. I truly appreciate the civility of the discussions. You know, everyone was pleasant in bringing forth their concerns, and we hear your concerns. But I just appreciate you being civil in doing that and being able to have an open discussion. That's not always the case, and I truly appreciate that.
Anybody else have anything? Not, we need a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Motion, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. We're done.